You're watching Focus. I'm Haig Ellian, and tonight we're going to be talking about art and interior design. My guest is Levon Jamgochian, who is a known artist in Europe, in Latin America, and in the United States. His work is prominently displayed in museums in all of those countries, and we're going to talk about his work and his work in interior design. Levon, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for inviting.
Now, Levon Jamgochian, would you tell us how your work has progressed throughout the years, where you started, where you are now, and where you hope to end up?
Surely. So I had quite an interesting experience as a young man.
But you're a native of Lebanon.
Yes, I come from Beirut. I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon.
And you went to Italy to study.
Yes.
Now, Italy, of course, is known for its artists and its artwork.
Yes, indeed. And I was influenced deeply from the Italian, especially Venetian Renaissance, Tintoretto, Tiziano, etc. And then I was exposed to the modern art, naturally. Chronologically speaking, if I can represent what I'm trying to do here, the Venetian period, which is called Venice and Humanity, and I was influenced from my surrounding, the Venetian buildings and the arches, bridges, water, etc. Then eventually I moved to a period after doing some of those etchings or intaglio and nudes and human forms, and I moved to a very unique period which is called submarine imagery. When I was a kid in Beirut, I used to dive. I loved going underground, underwater. And the images that I started kind of remembering or reflecting, eventually it gave me this inspiration of painting submarine imagery. Like there's a work, for instance, that the National Gallery owns, in Armenia.
Hold it up so the cameras can see the pictures.
Sure. Well, it's called Dynamism and Tenacity. This work here. That's towards the end of that period, right before I came to America. And at that point, I was becoming more abstract. Slowly, my representational images were becoming abstract forms. And eventually, I became very abstract painter in Miami. So the explosions, it's like inner explosion, deep down. But it's the continuation of my submarine imagery. When you look at the explosions and you compare.
Hold it up so
yes,
the camera
this,
can
right,
see
this
it.
work, both works actually, the Museum of Modern Art owns in Yerevan. It helped me to grow to the purity of abstract forms. And at that time, I was teaching Armenian to my ex-wife, and the letters of the Armenian alphabet inspired me, in the forms, and naturally connected to my culture, my Armenian background. And then I was so inspired, and I did very, very unique, very powerful series of abstractions from the Armenian alphabet. They're all alphabet letters, but deep down, I'm not, they're forms, they're purified forms, purified space, purified texture. So that's when I had my major one-man show at the Miami Museum of Modern Art. In 1971-72, I returned from abstraction to figurative images, which is called appliquage figures. Just 10 works. And this work, which is at the National Gallery of Armenia, as an example, or this work, it's called Cabaret D. I am in one of those members in the picture. So I returned to figurative images, but it happened by accident because I was involved at the time in Miami after I gave up my art gallery because I was going to be drafted to Vietnam. It's a long story. Unfortunately, I didn't go to Vietnam, but I had to give up my art gallery, and I ended up to become a buyer of a multi-million-dollar company which had many stores, including design department. And at that time, I was handling one of the departments of wallpaper, which was, and the wallpaper images I started using in my paintings. When I went back to figurative images, you see like those flowers, for instance, this background, it's wallpaper. There's some other works, similar ones. But I wasn't terribly happy with these. As I mentioned, I did only 10 works. Then eventually I went back to my identity, my style, which I had already formed before the 1972 images. So in Washington, I started using models of ballerinas, superimposed figures. This is one of my best works from that series I own in my collection. There are many nude forms superimposed. There's a ballerina there that is also at National Gallery in Armenia. So that led me into a series called American Inner World. How did it come? Very interesting. Cross country. I'd never been to California, so I cross country from Washington all the way to Los Angeles, and I experienced very unique things on the way. So that period, American Inner World, like this is one of the lithographs. It's like the 7 wonders here. There are 7 views in one. So that continued. A series included this particular work, a very popular work. It's called San Francisco Seagulls. So basically, I returned to my style, technique that I had built from 66 to 69. And this is 1979, 10 years later. And it's very clear. The forms are textural. It has textural values. And that's when I went to Armenia in 1979, the first time. Even though I lived in Armenia from 89 to 92, on and off for 2 years. And I did there very important cultural projects. I taught, I was filmed, and we did some movies, educational movies, etc. And then after I was invited the first time during Soviet days in 1979 by the government of Armenia, I was invited. So I came close to my roots. I discovered what really Armenia was, because all I knew from books in the past. And when I came back to Washington, I started a series called Ararat and Forefathers. And some of the works that I did, like this one, for instance, Ararat, it's called Ararat's Cock Crow. There's Mount Ararat on the top. Then there's another very important work that I still own, and I keep it in my private collection. This one here, which is called Forefathers Near Ararat. The peak, the 2 peaks, the highest peak is cut off. It's on purpose, because it's really belongs to Armenians, but it's not ours because was conquered. Anyway, I won't get into detail. That's why I've cut off the peak, the second peak. And there are churches here, and there's this tree as if it's burning tree, and there are little figures, this person sitting on a donkey, etc. So I'm trying to get into the core of cultural values. In this case, I'm referring to my own cultural Armenian values, which I was brought up with. When you look at this painting, for instance, it's in Lyon, it's in a private collection. It's called Ani and Lost Churches. It's a very beautiful watercolor. It's a large piece. Ani, it's in Turkey now, but the famous several thousand churches that existed in Ani centuries ago, and it was conquered, and some of them are in ruins. And anyway, about, my impressions that I got, I say I don't like to sit. I mean, I have painted some images, scenery, more realistic way, but most of the works that I have approached throughout those years, as I mentioned before, it's a reflection of what I see, what I feel. Then I come and represent what I felt in a different way. So I want to go beyond what I just felt or what I saw. And then, in fact, the period that we were talking, Ararat and forefathers, and this is in Kiev. This was purchased by an organization. At that time, they purchased, I believe, 8 or 9 works, which was a unique thing for me. It's called Prayer. It's a very beautiful watercolor and ink combined. And this one, I have it in my collection. It's called Hope for Unity. Hope for Unity. And again, Mount Ararat is there, but the peak is cut off. It's on purpose. And there are forms of this, well, some people think it's cut plants.
The colors are beautiful.
Thank you. So in 1980, in Catskills, when I created this series called Diary August 80, before I went to Catskills, I was at the beach in Ocean City, and I was painting right on the site, people at the beach and so on. And this is in the Catskills. It's called Girl's Cabin. It's a very beautiful watercolor. This belongs to the National Gallery, again in Armenia. This is in the Genocide Museum in Armenia. This is the National Gallery. So the return to Armenian kids, or return to Armenian atmosphere in 1980. It was a reflection, a continuation of my first trip to Armenia. I was connected.
Now you have quite a list of permanent public collections. Name some of them and tell us the kind of work that hangs there.
The Gyumri National Architecture and Urban Life Museum, they own my 19 full series of Unity Strength works. And Unity Strength was created in 1981-82. And the diamond emblem, right here in the middle, there's a diamond. And in the bottom of this image, you see skyline of New York and Statue of Liberty. When I first came to America, I came by boat, and the first thing I saw was New York skyline and Statue of Liberty. So I'm trying to give a message here, tying the new world, my new country, America, and the old culture, what I had not seen at that time still, Armenia. In this case, symbolically speaking, you will see Mount Ararat. On the top, there's Mount Ararat. There are churches, people with candles running around, and there's this giant holding this huge diamond. There are little Mignonettes. They're little figurines holding the diamond so that it doesn't fall. Anyway, the whole series grew from this one particular black and white lithograph. It's a lithograph. And then eventually I did the multicolor ones up to 18 colors. So this work, for instance, has 18 colors. Now, as I mentioned, the diamond is a symbol of hope, purity, wealth, the New World. And then you see Mount Ararat, and if you turn upside down, the shape of Mount Ararat also becomes shape of a diamond. You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Then I followed with Human Rights Suite, women's rights, human rights, and this is very unique painting here. You also see Indian teepees up here, how the Indians were treated in America, etc., how the Armenians were treated throughout the centuries. So human rights eventually led me to, it gave me the influence of focusing on women. So in 1987, I did a series called Love Life. And most of them, all of them, I would say, are women's forms, or one particular woman's form that relates to my personal experience in life, and plus has certain sensuality and life's fruits, what we got from life. So that was back in, as I mentioned, 87. And in 2007, not too long ago, my entire life's experience ended a series called Eternity.
Eternity.
Eternity, yes. That was the most intensive, excuse me, work that I've ever done besides the ones that I did in 81, 82. But this was even more intensive printmaking experience, process. And I was working with a lot of pain because I had many disability problems and pain, but I got hooked. And this one work that is called Before Dusk gave the reason to do the rest of the whole series. And I was going to do one work in black and white and another one in color. But while I was processing the color one, it grew, and I created some unique forms. It met the subject matter and the issue metamorphosed. In fact, most of my works has metamorphosis. The way it grows, it changes, and it goes through variations as well. And the Eternity suite, when I talk about eternal fields and hills, they're all hills. You don't see anything else. Hills and purity, clouds, nature, very purified forms. Then there's another work called Hills and Trees, very undefined trees, you can't tell. At the same time, I was doing sculptures, the ones that I mentioned earlier, the roots are out of my trees. And they're all called root. I numbered them, root 1, 2, 3, 13, 15, whatever, because it comes from a root. But root here means two. It's a play on word. Root, our roots, our cultural roots, but it comes also from the root. And why do I call eternity? Well, eventually, when we come to earth, God created people, humanity,
Tell us where your work is displayed. You hang in a number of museums.
Yes, I have.
You hang, your work hangs
Yes,
in
indeed.
a number
You're
of
right.
museums.
I have over 90 works to start with at the National Gallery of Yerevan in Armenia, and many other museums, including Smithsonian, the Johnson Wax Collection here in Washington, in New York. I have at the Armenian Museum in Paris. I have at least 15, 20 museums that own my works. The Museum of Modern Art in Yerevan, also the one in Miami. Coral Gables Low Art Museum has one of my paintings.
Now, you lived in Florida for a while.
Yes, indeed. I was fortunate enough when I moved to America. Actually, I came here for a series of one-man shows in 1968. Then I got married. Then I lived in Miami, in Coral Gables, moved to Key Biscayne, and eventually moved to Washington in 1972.
So you've been in Washington about 40 years.
Yes, 42
More or
years.
less.
Yes, long time.
Well, welcome to Washington.
Thank you.
Tell us about your work. Now, your work is unique in many aspects.
In short terms, I'm an evolutionary artist. I have grown from one series of works to another throughout the years. I've been in the field 50 years now, and I liked working in series, in suites. I call suites. So as a representational artist, especially in the beginning, my works had the tendency of I always bring subjects. I take subjects from life, of course, from people, from nature. And being an evolutionary artist, subject matter, it's important for me because what I take and what I give out from my soul, from my the messages, has to reflect somehow the reality. But I go beyond that, beyond the visible. And eventually, slowly, after 10 or 20 some years, my work grew and I became an abstract painter, especially when I lived in Miami. And then I had to return to representational images. And then eventually I started mixing abstract and representational images. Right now, I would say I'm the mixture of both.
What would you be best remembered as? If you had a choice, if you could say, I want to be remembered as, what would that be?
It's a very difficult question to answer.
That's why I asked it.
I appreciate that. I hope whatever I've done throughout those 50 years, the answer should be clear. It's the sincerity, number one. I am very sincere what I do, what I paint, how I paint. And the sincerity reflects naturally a message. So if you take a series that I did in 1984, 85, that it's called Human Rights Suite, which also ties to the sufferances of my family, the Armenians during the Armenian Genocide. The Turks created. We had lost like 17 people in my family, my grandparents, etc., uncles. I've never seen my grandfathers, for instance. They were butchered. So most of the works, I believe, even if the result might be kind of suffered images, or hidden sufferance that reflects in my work. I believe that's the reason comes from how I was brought up and ties to the sufferances of the Armenians because of what my grandparents had gone through, and my parents were orphans. So regardless what I have painted or what I have sculpted, because of being sincere, even if I try, for instance, a very beautiful woman, a nude that is sitting and I'm painting, sometimes that beautiful form may look somehow deformed, as an example. The deformation comes from my heart, from my soul. There's a reason why the beautiful form all of a sudden looks somehow deformed. As an example, this laying nude, this belongs to the National Gallery in Yerevan. So I believe the answer to your question, a very difficult, very important question to answer. Throughout the years, what I have absorbed from life, the reflection of life shows sufferance. So,
are these pictures on your website, Levon?
Yes.
Okay, would you tell us what your website is?
Well, it's a mini website. It belongs to a group of internationally well-known artists, and it's under www.levonj.tk, Thomas Karen.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes, www.levonj.tk.
You've been watching Focus. I'm Haig Ellian. Until next time, we wish you well.